To start your paper weaving, you will need a paper loom, paper weft strips, and scissors. First, we are going to fold the loom paper in half hamburger style with the text, which is the printed side facing out. Make sure that you line up the edges and the corners as much as you can. Then we are going to cut on the broken lines that are printed on the paper, starting our cutting on the folded side. Make sure you look for where the printed broken lines are, and that is where you're going to cut. For most of the lines, they stop a little before the end of the paper, so don't cut all the way through your paper. For the two lines closest to the edges, they get cut all the way through. Make sure that you stop your cutting when you reach the solid printed line. Like here on the last broken line, it was cut all the way through. Then your loom is ready to be used for weaving. We will be weaving with the printed side facing up. Notice the printed X's on the loom. When you weave your weft strips, you will go over the X's and under the parts of the loom that have no X. This will help you create the correct weaving pattern. You should start your weaving on the right side and weave your weft strips through your loom from right to left. Once you have woven a strip of paper, push it all the way up to the solid line. If you didn't cut your warp strips for your loom all the way, the weft strips will not fit correctly. You can go back and cut the warp strips a little bit more if you need to. Once your first weft strip is in, then you can begin weaving your second one. Remember to go over the X's and under the blank spaces. And remember, always push the strip all the way up to the top when you're done weaving it. You will see that there are lightly printed horizontal guides on the loom paper that show you where the weft strip should be. Then you can go ahead and repeat the same process with the rest of the strips of paper until your loom is filled up. Once you think you're done, make sure that all of your paper strips are going over the X's, so you shouldn't see any X's. So like here, I didn't quite weave the last strip all the way through, so I need to go over the X's and under the part of the loom that doesn't have an X on it. And then remember, the side with the printed lines is the back. Make sure that you write your name somewhere on the printed side near the top corner. Don't forget to write your class code with your name. So when we flip it over, we can see that there's no printed lines on here. The next step is gluing down the strips of paper. And then we're going to cut off the extra pieces that are hanging outside of the loom, which is the white part on my project. So these paper strips are a little bit longer than the loom, so they stick out a little bit. So you're just gonna put a little bit of glue on each one to hold it in place. And we're gonna do this on the front and the back. So I'm doing it on the front, and I'm going to flip it over and do it on the back after, because then these ones will not be glued down. So just a little bit of glue under each paper strip. When you're gluing, make sure that the other side has enough paper, so you should see that paper strip sticking out. Like right here, I wouldn't want to pull it and not be able to see the orange and glue it down like this, because then when I flip it over, I wouldn't have enough of that paper strip showing. I've glued all the edges of the front side, I can flip it over and glue the ones on the back. Once all the paper strips are glued, then we can go ahead and cut off the extra paper that's hanging off the side. I'm being careful when I'm doing this not to cut my loom. I just want to cut as close as I can to the white paper edge without cutting through it. So just cutting through the paper strip that's hanging off. You'll need to do this slowly and carefully because it's different than just cutting a regular piece of paper. Once you do one side, turn it over and see if there's any pieces that you can tell are hanging off the edge. Like I can see a little bit of the colored paper, so I'm cutting a little closer to the white edge. Now I found a paper strip that wasn't completely glued down. So if you find any while you're cutting that are not glued, make sure you stop and glue them again. We want all the paper strips to stay in place. Alright, I think I'm all done with my paper weaving. With your extra pieces of paper that you cut off, make sure that you throw them away and clean up your table space. I hope you had fun learning the paper weaving process. I can't wait to see how yours turns out.